This is the ELECTile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen.
Probably a ton of people in the economy right now that would love to, like, you know, they have some talent, good skills, whatever, or ideas for new products that they can build out that would be better than what's out in the market today. But they can't go and try that stuff,
right?
Largely because they think it's too risky, right? Like the risk of yourself going bankrupt, or you're going to probably need to take out loans in order to fund that and stuff. It makes it a lot harder. Under Bitcoin, what you can do if you have those dreams is to just save up in Bitcoin. And now, like 5 years later, you have plenty of money to go and try whatever it is that you want to try. And because it's your money, you're going to spend it a lot more efficiently instead of like sort of the current model, which is get VC funding and spend like a drunken sailor and pretend that your company is worth more because it happens to be popular, something like that. It's instead of being unmoored from reality, you're getting closer to reality, which I think ultimately is better for everybody because it's actually based on fundamentals and not on, you know, sort of insane money printing and these fantasies that we have that it's worth X when really it's just a lot of people putting money in because it has nowhere else to go.
I think what you say is really important too, and it also speaks to one of the most pernicious consequences of all this is the fact that family development, starting a family, is being delayed, is not happening at all in a lot of cases, is because people my age, people in their 20s and 30s, who are already basically racked by student loan debt, which is a consequence as well of this fiat economy. And then on top of that, you have actual inflation, if we measure it by the pre-1980 standard, is something like 10 to 12%. It's probably even higher than that by this point, with a 30% increase in the money supply as well. So you're losing 10, 12%. How many people are getting 10, 12% raises every year? Not too many. That's really right. I mean, maybe you go a couple percent if you're lucky. So you're sort of in this continual rat race. So you don't feel secure enough to be able to start a family. You have all this bad debt piling up. Your job isn't keeping up with the pace of the real inflation, which is being obscured by the CPI data, because again, 1979, we're looking at double-digit inflation if you measure by then. So having a currency is actually hard. I made a joke in my last podcast about Bitcoin, about how Bitcoin is the hardest money ever made, short of sleeping with Harvey Weinstein or working at an Amazon warehouse. So having a hard money that isn't subject to depreciation by people in the Federal Reserve or the government destroying its value allows you to sort of take risks, allows you to go start that business, allows you to plan for the future, allows you to even have a family. And one of the biggest crises that we're going to have as a society, I think, is going to be our Japan's already seeing it, Italy's seeing it, Spain's seeing it, sort of topsy-turvy, upside-down pyramid, where you have a lot of old people, you don't have that much young people, and the young people themselves aren't having kids, and who's going to pay for the old people, especially with a depreciating currency, right? So that's the sort of message that I know that you like to advance as well. And I, particularly with people in my age group, sort of understand things in this way, because as you said, people feel like they're being stolen, but I think it's even more than that, because they instinctively know they're being stolen, right? Like I never really thought of me being stolen from, but we all sort of see, well, okay, but tuition is going up like, double-digit percent on this year, and the housing, I can't afford a house. My parents, people say my parents were able to afford a house when they were in their 20s, and I can't even afford a house in my 40s now in the same area. So they instinctively know something's wrong, but they can't exactly put a thought to it, put a word to it as you do, and you demonstrate that, well, you are being stolen from, and this is how exactly works, which I like. I want to ask you about. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so you are being stolen from. You're being stolen from so much that you're going negative, right? Like, which is debt, right? It's not just that your stuff that you already currently own is stolen from. Your future is being stolen from through that. And that's an even more pernicious thing. And this is something more that I think that you were talking about, which is, you're being stolen from, but not just your current self, your future self is also being stolen from. And, this is the pernicious thing about debt, and especially government debt. It's not just our grandchildren that are being stolen, it's your future self, right? You have to pay the piper, and if you're gonna live another 20 years, that you're being stolen from too. And that level of theft is just so pernicious and so like destabilizing, and it puts you in a state of essentially slavery, because you have this debt that you have to service the whole time. And most people just like because they can't save and they're continually being stolen from, you get into this enormous amounts of debt, and next thing you know, like half your life is over and you have like zero to show for it. It's all consumed on the front end without anything like to back it up, basically.
Right. And I think as well that what plays into that as well is why people sometimes fail to make the connection. I think most people still do, particularly, like I said, the millennials, although hopefully they're going to start to get it, is like, for example, your Spotify membership is like $10 a month. It's like, oh, I could get all this music for free. So there are certain things that are like incredibly deflationary. Your TV is cheaper, and you can get every book on Amazon for like fraction the price of what they used to be. So you don't actually draw the connection, because the sort of simple things, the entertainment things, the sort of convenient things seem to be cheaper, but all the things everybody wants, like the house, the healthcare, the education, there's certain cars, like that stuff is all going up, and you can't quite understand how is that happening, because now I can get every this CD collection I have on my Spotify, this playlist would have cost me like $1,000 a few years ago, and now I get it for $10 a month. So I think it's really important to draw that connection.
Yeah. So I mean, this is what we would call like bread and circuses, right? Like, and this is what the Romans did, where they would mollify this populace that was obviously like a large amount of them were like Roman slaves, so they were always like concerned about revolt or whatever. But it was okay, let's make sure that they are entertained, so we're going to give them bread, make sure that there's like a food program and some sort of entertainment. And that seems to be the case today. I don't know if Spotify is profitable, right? Like, and if they're not profitable, well, where are they getting the money? Well, they're getting it from investors. Well, who are the investors? Well, it's usually like VCs. That's all newly printed money. So in a sense, we're getting bread and circuses, but through sort of the market, and there's tons of food stamp.
We're not getting bread and circus. We're getting weed and Netflix. That's the
and it's a lot cheaper for the people in power, because if it's digital, you can just sort of infinitely copy it, right? Like it's really only bandwidth cost, which honestly gets cheaper every year, which is why you're able to get $10.99 for a Spotify membership, and you can listen to all the music you want, because it's only like a megabyte per minute, and even if you're listening for 24 hours a day, it's actually not that much, and you're they can actually afford to send it to you. So yeah, all that is really just sort of like a way for the government to keep you sort of blind to the fact that everything else is kind of getting worse, and this is what the Romans did during times like bread and circuses was much more a thing during the debasement of the denarius, more so than like earlier times of Rome when they had harder money. So that's basically what's happening, and that's why like people aren't necessarily waking up, because in a sense their immediate needs are sort of like satisfied, and they're entertained and distracted from all of the stuff that really they would learn about if things were, I guess, a little more painful. But this is how you anesthetize a large part of the populace.
Absolutely. And it's not only that, it's also I think on the corporate front as well. You see like Raytheon putting up a gay pride flag on during gay pride. It's like they make missiles that can kill people. And it's like it's like, and Amazon will put up like the BLM banner on their website, and meanwhile they have all sorts of African Americans and Hispanic employees working at their warehouses who complain of horrible conditions of their work and not being able to use the bathroom and all sorts of things. So what do? They distract and say, no, look, we're the good guys. And meanwhile, they can get away with their practices as well. And those are the same people, I think, as well. I think this is where the libertarians and conservatives sometimes miss the connection in this respect, is that Bitcoin is not only powerful because of its ability to counteract government oppression, government takeover of liberties and diminishing of liberties with respect to the people, but as well as the corporations today can basically block you out. It first started with things like Twitter and Facebook, where they cancel your speech or deplatform you for things you say. But now it's getting even more dangerous and scary, because I don't know if you saw the whole PayPal Anti-Defamation League thing, where they're saying, okay, well, if we deem you to be a extremist or say things that we deem is unfit for the public to hear, well, then you can't take PayPal. And Visa and MasterCard did this with Pornhub, and apparently OnlyFans the other day were pressured into getting rid of explicit content because of big banks, stuff like that. So whatever you think about those companies, it's clear it's not going to stop there. It starts off with people. It starts off with sort of things that we could kind of agree with, and then it goes on to, oh well, we don't like what you're saying. We don't like what you represent as a company. So yeah, you can't transact with Visa or MasterCard or PayPal or Stripe or any of these things, and then you're locked out of the modern financial ecosystem as well.
This is a slippery slope of authoritarianism. You almost always start with something that seems reasonable, and then they just take a little bit more power each time, and it gets less and less reasonable to the point where we're locked out of our own neighborhoods and we're forced to stay indoors or whatever. This is how liberty dies. It's with a whimper, not with a bang. So like what can we do? Like, how does Bitcoin fix that? I think is kind of your question. Basically, Bitcoin, it has an ethic of verify, don't trust. So, centralized services are essentially all trust magnets. So if you're on Twitter, you're trusting them with all of your data and all your tweets and things like that, and they can put out whichever things that they want because they are the central controller. And this is the same with Google, Facebook, or like you were saying with PayPal, Visa, and everything else. The ethic of Bitcoin, I think, is much more towards verification, not trusting, towards decentralization, and that's going to mean that people are hosting their own stuff. So it's one thing to put your stuff on Facebook, right? Like some weird message that Facebook doesn't like, and in a sense, the property boundaries there are very fuzzy. So it's not at all clear what is yours and what is theirs, because they clearly own the databases and the servers that have all of the data, but you're the one that created it. So who owns what, right? Like, and there's no clear boundary. But if you're running your own server and you're pushing it out to people that want it, then there's no problem. There's no central party. There's no sort of single point of failure or a choke point at which things can kind of go awry. Nick Szabo says that trusted third parties are security holes, and they definitely are, because they have the ability to control things. And we are getting things controlled, because of these giant walled gardens where all of the servers are run by the same company and things. But one of the optimistic things about Bitcoin is that we're moving kind of away from that model.